Hi, everyone. We're going to get started with our next session. My name is Hamza. I'm a master's student with the International Policy Program here. I'm delighted to introduce Dilawar Syed to join me for a panel session. Dilawar is an entrepreneur, board member, and former U.S. cabinet official whose leadership has spanned various public and private sector organizations, including as Deputy Administrator for the U.S. Small Business Administration and Special Envoy for Commercial Affairs at the State Department. In a decades-long career in Silicon Valley, Dilawar led and scaled ventures in AI, software, and consumer web. After his public service, he's joined the LBJ School of Public Affairs and McComb School of Business at his alma mater, UT Austin, as faculty, and has founded the LBJ Business Forum. He's also advising several technology ventures as board members. Please help me welcome Dilawar Syed. All right, so today we're going to talk about Dilawar's career across tech and public service. I want to frame why this conversation matters. So if you're an American 28 years or under, you've never voted in a presidential election that doesn't involve President Trump. So all we've known is politics under Trump. And so for a lot of people my age and younger, civic duty is not a self-evident value. And so I'm excited to discuss with Dilawar how he came to value public service and why he chose to join the public service after a successful and impressive career in the private sector.
Thank you, and then thanks for having me. I genuinely believe that we've been very fortunate as those who built tech companies. You heard some great colleagues earlier today. Their skills to attract talent, build organizations, scale organizations. Government could use that skill. And I felt very strongly, unlike some of the things you heard earlier, that you can actually have passions outside your work while you're building a company. And that you must share that, and you must serve your country. And with that spirit in mind, I was fortunate to have been nominated by President Biden to help run the SBA, which at the time when I joined, this is during pandemic, was processing $1.2 trillion worth of COVID relief. That is 10x the size it normally does in loan portfolio. And I do think that people who've had the opportunity to build and scale companies could bring that perspective. And that was one of the primary reasons that I wanted to go and serve the country, especially at this moment of historic recovery post-pandemic.
So why does representation matter? Everyone says representation is good, but tell us why it actually matters.
I want to share with you a rather tough incident. A week after October 7th, I was looking at some horrible news on the phone. A 6-year-old named Wadea Al-Fayumi, a Palestinian-American boy, had been stabbed 26 times by his landlord, who screamed, "You Muslims must die." And when I saw that, I was like, as a father, my reaction. So I texted one of the comms comm staffer at the White House, and I said, "When is the president going to say something?" Or my question was, "How can I help?" And his response to me was, "We are not tracking it. We are not tracking it." Now, let me say this. I work with my colleagues. We share our values. His reason for not tracking is not because he doesn't care. He's not tracking it because his echo chamber is different than my echo chamber, perhaps. Because I am representing communities that other people probably don't look at. And I genuinely am saying that, because I'm not going to make any judgment. And I said, well, I'm here to track for you. The president has to say something, because it's horrible. We don't have to wait for any local authorities to make a judgment that there was a hate crime. We know already from witnesses that this is what the man was screaming. So it's just it's a very difficult story, and there's many that I can share if you had more time, that it reminded me, beyond my day job at the SBA, at the historic time of recovery and disaster response, I had another job. And that was to bring my lived experiences, to bring my connectivity with the communities that I'm rooted in.
Thanks so much. That's that's a really powerful story and really goes to show how representation makes a difference in policy outcomes. So let's talk about Dosti, which is why we're here. So before government, you were the founding president of Freshworks, which is a Chennai-based company that you led to which later IPO'd. So you're Pakistani-born. You chose to join and then champion an Indian-based company. Tell us about that experience and why you chose to join Freshworks.
So I don't know how many of you know Freshworks. It's one of the first companies, actually the first SaaS company that came out of India, was founded in Chennai, India. We had a shared investor of Entire Global. And when I exited my previous company with Tiger, I asked the investor how I can be helpful. He said, well, you should talk to Girish. It's a software company, perhaps you can be helpful. So I met Girish, and I was absolutely blown away by the mission of the company, which was to democratize access to enterprise-grade software for small, medium businesses. As you can see, there's a through line in my career when it comes to SMBs. And we spent, literally, we were supposed to meet for lunch for 1 hour, and we had 5-hour lunch outside Moscone Center. And I was just absolutely moved by his clarity of vision and his humility. And of course, as part of that, and I was the first employee in the US. It was all, at the time, 50 people in Chennai. And as you can imagine, I've had to travel to Chennai to be able to, help build the business. Now, I'm a Pakistani American, and as some of you may have shared or heard in the last 2 days, if you hold a Pakistani passport, it's not easy to travel to India. And I, at several points, was told, you have to give up your citizenship in order to apply for an American passport. And I said, with all my love for Freshworks, I'm not going to do that. I'll apply on Pakistani passport. But long story short, I finally got to India. And there's one incident, and that Hamza and I were talking about, that I want to share with you, which was formative both for the company, but also for what we are talking about, which is a topic of Dosti. I had all hands, and the team had asked me to share our plans to build the company. And at the end, and this is a young audience, so just to share with you, it's mostly like 300 people, and the average age is about 21. And this one young man in the audience asked me a question, and he said, would you ever go back to your home country and be involved in civic leadership? And this was because I had shared my work in the Obama administration as an advisor. It wasn't the question, it was the way he framed it. It was the way he referred to my home country. And I said to him, I said, by the way, my home country is America. I'm an American, but I think you're referring to Pakistan. And there was this awkward silence in the room. And they were chuckling. And I said, let me address something. So I shared with them what I experienced the night before. I often, when I travel, I walk outside, and the hustle and bustle of Chennai, if you can find a footpath to walk. But I was trying to walk, and it was drizzling, and I looked up. And I saw Jhandiyan, India's small flag, being put up for its Independence Day. It was my first time in India on Indian soil. And I looked up, and I swear, I felt pride. I had never thought how I'd imagined that moment, but I genuinely felt pride. Oh, we kicked out a colonial power together. This is India's Independence Day. And I'm sharing this with this audience, very young audience. They've never probably met a Pakistani. And I said, I'm going to go home tonight because I'm going to fly to Lahore to see my mom. And there's no direct flights between Chennai and Lahore. It'll take me like 6 hours of layover in Dubai to finally get there. And I said, when I arrive in Lahore, I'll see Pakistan's flags up for its Independence Day. And there are no two countries on planet Earth that are joined at the hip and cannot wish away each other. And I have traveled a lot. I was working in Turkey before, and I said, look, the moment I landed in Chennai, even though it's, I grew up in Punjab, so it's probably closer to North India than South India, but there was something about the soil. I felt home. So I don't know what you are referring when it comes to my home country, my friend, but I'm home. This is home for me. And I will tell you, there was a woman right next to this young man. She was crying. And I realized it was important for me to address the big elephant in the room. Why would you pick a Pakistani American to run an India-founded company? Not that that's what Garish thought or I even crossed my mind, but it comes in people's mind. And that day, that team connected with me in ways that was needed. And I also felt, for me as a leader, I had to form a bond with these people. Because as you know, many of us are entrepreneurs in the room, it's a toil. And there was time and distance in between. And to this day, my Freshworks family is my friend. And when I was a diplomat at the State Department, and I went to India, and I only had time for one city, and I said, I want to go to Chennai. Because that's where we got to build this great company. So that experience was, again, formative, and it, again, made me realize that once you have this interaction and you spend time and you open your heart, people will find the common ground that we so much share.
Yeah, and I think that's the only example we've heard today. We've heard about coordination and cooperation in Silicon Valley, in New York, in Dubai, but I think this is the first example we've heard of Pakistan and Indian collaboration inside India or Pakistan. I think makes it a very special story. So my last question, and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. So you describe yourself as a product and a success story of the American dream. And so let's look a bit forward. We've got a lot of students here. You came to this country from Lahore in '91 as a college freshman, and you had a great career in the private sector. You had a great career in the public service. Do you still think that American dream in America today is still around? Is it economically and socially just as achievable? And what advice do you give to students looking forward on how to have that same success story?
I believe that American dream is there and it's alive only if we work to keep it alive. Absolutely, it is alive, but we have to earn it. And it should be very clear that no matter how much success we may have achieved in this valley and how much you heard amazing stories today, but I'll also tell you, to be blunt with you, we cannot just focus on impact as making money. And somehow we kid ourselves that having a great product is going to change the world. I can assure you there is limitation to how it changes the world. In fact, sometimes it has the opposite effects. We are seeing hyperscalers spend $1 trillion on CapEx, and I don't know how many jobs that's going to create. So I want to be very honest, because I've been on both sides, that we have to confront the reality that there's a limitation to where we can go if we don't invest in trying to maintain who we are as a country and try to fight the fight to keep our core ideals. Today, I don't know if you tracked the news, President Trump made history in attending the Supreme Court hearing on, guess what? The 14th Amendment. By show of hands, how many of you are in the room who are American citizens to parents at the time who were not American citizens? And there may be others, and thank you for sharing your hands. There's something that Justice Roberts said that warmed my heart, and that gives me hope that our fight, as we continue, and we must, has an end. The Solicitor General said something like, "Well, we're in a new world, so this 14th Amendment shouldn't apply. We're in a new world." And Justice Roberts said something, "Well, we have the same Constitution." So, again, American Dream is an interesting, unique concept, but we're going to have to make sure that we fight for it. And let me also say, we don't just fight for your American dream, but we also fight for everyone else's American dream. There's one thing that I'll tell you, quite frankly, that used to bug me and still bugs me about Silicon Valley is how insular we are when we see success. We just see success of people like us. We all chose to come here, and we are a small part, South Asians, of this multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy. This country has a painful history of slavery. And so much of my time, I disproportionately invested in traveling to the Deep South. None of us would be here, those of us who are South Asians, had it not been for the civil rights leaders. None of us would be here. And I want every single household of South Asian Americans telling that story to their children. A civil rights leader fought for our right to enter this country by advocating for immigration acts that are opening up folks from other than Europe. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, no matter how great and smart and rah-rah that you hear in the Valley. So our impact is, quite frankly, not really impactful if we don't pay it forward. Not just to people like us or the founders who look like us, but the rest of the country, the long tail that has been forgotten, and I saw them forgotten by both parties, by the way, for too long. And that response, when you see in a broken social contract, is one of the reasons we are where we are politically. So again, the dream is alive. It can be alive if you work for it, but if you also make sure it's accessible to everybody, especially those that have been systemically held back because of redlining, not having credit. The stories I would hear at SBA that you couldn't apply for a loan because you don't have a collateral because, of course, they couldn't buy a home because of redline. It's generational, disinvestment and policy neglect.
Thanks so much. We're gonna leave some time for audience questions, so we have some mics being run. Please raise your hand if you've got a question. We'll start. Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Faraz. I have a regular tech job in Silicon Valley, but I have worked about 10 plus years in Pakistani media. I spend, at least 10% of my time countering hateful fake news via AI videos and, through social media. My question to you is, in today's hostile environment where, politics of hate and bigotry has become an incentive because it gets you votes. What is the solution to this? How do we counter, because there is an incentive of having a politics of hate and bigotry?
So for us, what I've seen is there are also shining examples, most recently with Zohran Ramdani's campaign in New York City, that he took the high road, despite the fact that his campaign, and I was a supporter of his campaign, he was constantly beset by things that you all have tracked. But it was a clear message. A message of opportunity, a message of affordability. So I do think that if you're talking about just political aspect, that if you have a message and you have a, frankly, good candidate, you can move the ball forward. Right now, I'm spending time in Austin. We have James Tallarico, who I'm sure some of you are tracking, is a young local state legislator, and his message it's a refreshing message. A lot of reference to his faith. So I do think that there is room for that, but you have to make that room. You have to have that message. You have to do the outreach. You have to show up, and people will follow you. But at the same time, we should not kid ourselves that the other message, which is to divide and fear-mongering and xenophobia, because it's easy to say, it's easy to deflect blame on the other, on someone who doesn't look like you. That's always going to be there, and especially frankly, the Trump presidency and after, especially this one, it is very much part of a polity. But I think the best way to counter that is to make sure that we have a clear message that gives people a sense of, opportunity and hope, and you're disciplined about it. And I'm an optimist, and I do think that could lead to, hopefully, a more positive polity than we have today. But what we can't just do is counter negativity with negativity, because, again, when you look at people's problems, they're looking for solutions, and they will respond to it if they see that.
Thank you for being here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
I found your story about being proud of the Indian flag rising very powerful. And the reason you gave was because you felt that we kicked out the colonial power. This is something we never talk about. And maybe as a we're always talking about partition. We talk about the line drawn to separate the countries, and we never really talk about the win, the great win of knocking out the colonial power. And perhaps this message can be, this story can be told more powerfully, and groups like Dosti can take this and use it as a means of bonding across borders. What do you think of that?
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your compliment, and I'll share this with you. I've shared this story in Pakistan to Pakistani audiences without censoring it, and they responded with the same warmth that I got in this audience. So people respond to positive things. I don't know what they're teaching today in both countries, but when I was growing up in Pakistan, when we were taught the independence movement, we spent about half the time talking about the era when Jinnah was collaborating with Gandhi before the division of Bengal. So there is a shared history that is not taught, or maybe it's de-emphasized. So it's important to talk about the shared struggle without by any means, diluting the challenges. I grew up in Sialkot, which is on the border, 30 kilometers from Jammu. And there were cracks in our Roshandan when I was growing up because of the 1965 bombing in Sialkot. So I personally have seen that a third of the city are refugees from Kashmir. And someone said earlier many times, there's generational trauma still in those communities to this day. But there's also a shared struggle. Because had that not been shared struggle, this mighty nations would not have been where they are. So I lean into it, and I certainly hope more people lean into it, because it's not it was almost 100+ years of movement that obviously eventually went to an outcome that resulted in the partition. Thank you.
This is going to be the last question for Dilawar sir, unfortunately, but.
Thank you for the talk, really powerful. It's great to see a record of private sector as well as public service. And thank you for talking about the civil rights movement and spending time in the Deep South. Indians, Pakistanis, all of us here by any means are a very affluent community and very privileged community, let's be honest. But there's a lot of need in our backyard over here to do more. So my question to you is, as a community, although we may have an Indian identity or a Pakistani identity, the world sees us as kind of being the same, right? And should we be doing more to help people around us in this area and use that to form a shared sense of identity and take it forward? And when I say more people, I mean there's a lot of underprivileged. I mean there's a lot of jobs will be displaced. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of class divide is increasing. There's a lot of suffering around us, which we are in a bubble.
So the short answer is yes. We have a lot more to do than we're doing today. But I want to expand upon that. The question is how you can be effective, and how do you find that will or find the channel to do it. And I'm just going to share with you my own example. I'm a naturalized Pakistani American. I grew up in Pakistan. I came here for college. My experience of America is once I moved here to Ohio for college. And I've been asked this all the time, well, you go into these communities, African communities, you're very passionate. Are you black? I mean, they generally think that perhaps I have a connection to the black community. And I tell them, no, I'm not. And I don't have to be black. I can be a Pakistani American who is passionate about African American success in this country. And I wish there are more. But I tell them, let me tell you where I learned my sense of equity. And I'm going to open it up a little bit. And why do I care? Because, by the way, if you don't care, it doesn't translate into values, it doesn't translate into policy. You can go to government and say, I'm going to lobby Trump to get crypto regularized so I can make more money. I'm sorry, I would not consider that to be policy. That is lobbying for your special interest, and that's going on today with tech bros supporting this administration. But my path is different, and there is opportunity for us to do more. So to answer the question, why do I care? I take my inspiration from my own, where I grew up, what I saw. My father used to run a sports goods factory in Sialkot. It's known for sports goods manufacturing. And I saw him, I saw labor in our home and the way they were treated. And there's always a sense of respect for people. I'll share with you another story from my faith, and not just the fact that we often hear that Prophet Muhammad said a sermon that there's no difference between an Egyptian or an Arab, but a story that has stayed with me, and I'm writing a book. I know you're going to ask me later on, but I'll share a passage which often we don't lean into because it's very emotional, is from Karbala. There is a story. Imam Hussein had a companion who was of African descent. His name is John ibn Huwa. He was a freed slave that came into Ali's household and then became a companion. The night before the 10th Muharram, the story goes that Imam Hussain shut the lamp down and said, if you're not next of kin, you're free to go. This is my fight for justice. I don't want you to get into this. And when they turned the lamp on, John was still standing there. And he said, why? He said, no, I cannot leave you in this moment. The next day, as you know, as those of you who have followed this story, his companions go fight the battle, one by one. When John's turn, he takes the permission, he fights, and he's mortally wounded. And the tradition was Imam Hussain would himself go and try to bring these fighters back. So when he was picking John ibn Huwa, the dying John ibn Huwa, who was bleeding, said, I have one request for you. Can I call you my brother? I heard this story when I was 5 years old. He was bleeding, and so was Imam Hussain from all the arrows. Hussain mixes his blood with his own blood, and he covers his face with it. And he says, your blood and my blood is the same. We are brothers today, we were brothers before, we'll be brothers forever. I have shared this story in the black community. I did not need to read Malcolm X's biography. I did not need to watch the Roots movie, which is compelling, but our own traditions. And we have all sorts of traditions. I'm just showing you one that inform our sense of equity and justice, which is why I cared. And I want, frankly, more of us to care. I don't think we do enough of that. And that's one of the reasons that this success is limited. And if you leave outside this bubble, there is resentment. I'm spending time in Austin, and you know what's happening in the South Asian community. There is all sorts of racial backlash. And so let's lean into it. We are so endowed, we are so well to do. It's not going to make any less of us. It's going to actually grow us. So, and there's many opportunities. You don't have to run for office, even though that's a great way to go and serve. You don't have to be in an appointed role. You could be doing nonprofit work. You could be actually making sure that you're hiring more diverse teams. You could be setting up offices in Memphis and in New Orleans and in Augusta, Georgia, to expand the team and give opportunities, but you have to care. And you have to prioritize. And unless we do that, I don't think we are successful as a community.
Thank you.
Dilawar, thanks so much for joining me. This was a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing more of you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.